Welcome to First Impressions, the podcast where we talk about our love for Jane Austen and give a big middle finger to all those haters. I'm your host, Kristen, and I am joined by, hooray, back from pregnancy, Maggie.
Yay!
She's back.
I'm here. I made it. I've missed you all so much. I've missed talking to adults and not my adorable and super advanced and brilliant 7-week-old baby. But still, it's like Bayard, my mom, and the baby. So I'm so happy to be back.
Welcome back to the world of podcasting. And we are both really excited and honored to welcome today Bianca Hernandez to the podcast. You may know Bianca as at Book Hoarding on many social media account platforms, and you may also know her from her previous involvement in Drunk Austen. Bianca, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. We were just thrilled. Obviously, we followed you on all your accounts for so long, and you're hysterical and all your posts are hysterical. So it becomes like a feeling of Jane Austen royalty on the show. And we're like, oh my goodness. And we actually, so you may or may not remember, but we met in October at Jasna in Williamsburg. And you and I got to exchange a few words, but actually we wound up talking to Frank, your husband, for like 45 minutes about Star Wars. And congratulations, by the way, on your marriage. Your recent wedding.
Thank you. I'm glad that you reminded me if and where I met you, because let me tell you, like, I run in a lot of different circles. Like, I know that I feel like recently more people know me from Jane Austen stuff, but I'm also just like, where do I know somebody? Was I in costume? What costume? But also they were in costume. And I don't know about you, but if you hang out with cosplay people, sometimes people are completely transformed, which is like magic, but also sometimes that means I don't remember exactly. Like if you are not in your full, like blue man makeup, I'm going to be like, whoa.
I try to remember people based on their hair, which is not a great indicator when we're talking about cosplay because it can be completely different. So we met at the ball at Jasna. And I remember Kristen came up to me and she said, oh my God, Bianca said, we're going to go talk to Bianca. Okay, I'm talking to her. I think that you guys were engaged at the time. She said, I tried to.
I don't remember a ton from the ball. It was
that's okay
because
we were just fangirling over you. That's
all I know
my
was
point.
I kept bothering people playing whist, and I went onto the dance floor maybe for 2 seconds, and I mingled because someone had gifted me from catering a bottle of wine.
Oh, nice!
They're just like, you can take this bottle. We're not gonna. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this bottle. So like, I had a whole bottle. Well,
meeting you was a big highlight for us because we were big fans of yours. So we were just like fangirling over you. It was pretty funny.
Either you or Frank gave us the shutter shades, the Drunk Austen shutter shades. And so I have an Instagram picture of me, with the shades and I posted on my personal Instagram, I met Jane Austen. Then when I went back to the library, all my student employees were like, how was your nerdy vacation? Right. And I was like, okay, so there's this account. It's called Drunk Austen. And here I am at work, like showing them this picture because it was like the highlight. And
I'd like to point out that these people all work in a library. So I don't know where they get off calling you a nerd.
Yeah. Not about that.
Yeah.
They're all nerds. They're just jealous. They aren't as cool of a nerd as you are.
That is true. That is very true. Because we're very cool.
Facts.
Well, I think cosplay is cool and these things are cool. And people outside of this, I don't know why they don't get it. Don't they see us having so much fun?
It's just jealous.
Well, they do now. I mean, nerds are very popular. I feel like things like the Marvel movies have really made nerd fandom cool, which is why we're so excited to have Bianca on the podcast because she's like a big deal fan and she's like one of the coolest people we know.
I'm very honored. I don't think I'm very cool, but
that's what makes you cool, girl.
Yeah, that's right.
Listen, if you thought you were cool, it wouldn't work.
Facts.
Let's get into your connection with Jane Austen. How did you get into the fandom? What was your entryway?
Right. I think that like entryway into fandom is so different than entryway into Austen. Cause like,
okay, let's talk about both.
Yeah. So like, I remember my first Jane Austen book, and I got it from a library book sale, and it's a shitty, like one of those like 75-cent penny novels, but like, it wasn't quite like Victorian penny novel. It was like maybe a 70s version because Lizzie Bennet had blue eyeshadow.
Oh my God, amazing.
And like, of course, as like, I must have been like a preteen probably at that point. I was like, this is such a cool cover. Oh my God, blue eyeshadow. Cause like that was at the time too when like blue eyeshadow was trying to come back, but it was like a pastel or glitter. Right. And I was like, damn, like, look at this. I want this. Okay. So I had that book and like, I still have it. I like the smell of it is just so visceral for me, but like clearly it had been used for someone's college course. And I was like, oh, look, it's been used. So cool. So I tried reading it. And like, again, this was like, I was probably 10, 11, 12, like in that range. And I was just like, I don't know what they're talking about.
It's a lot of semicolons for
There's like these blank shires.
Yeah.
You know, like I could kind of get toward the plot of like, oh, so they're trying to get married. But like, I really wasn't equipped to really fully understand. I didn't even have a grasp of what the Regency era was. And I mean, I can talk about this now a little bit, which is, I'll talk more probably about costuming, but like for me, what has really helped click literature to history and all these things for me has been understanding fashion, which is really, I know like some people might be, what? But I'm like, literally understanding why the silhouettes are a certain way because of war, import, all these things. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that has like helped me as like an entry point to understanding how all of these cascade and connect to each other. And like, it's just been a fascinating foray to get really much more in historical costuming because I feel like I've learned 10 times more from having those things versus when we're taught in school where it's very stratified and like, and this is the thing. And then this is this era in this country. And you just, when you don't understand importing and exporting and why that fashion, you know, like that connection is so cool. Anyway, long story short is I didn't understand what the fuck Jane Austen was trying to tell me, but I know that I for sure had seen Clueless by then. It wasn't until much later that I knew Clueless was Jane Austen, but I liked Clueless. I probably had sat through 1995 at some point with some family members. They weren't really into that kind of like period drama stuff, but like sometimes that stuff would show up because, you know, PBS and such, BBC, things like that. But it wasn't until like high school. It was high school when I had to reread some Jane Austen stuff. And I'd given some other books a try. Like I'd given Sense and Sensibility a try. And I think I was into that. Mansfield, I just could not let, like I tried. Even now I still have issues, but like, it's
sorry, Kristen.
Yeah, it's okay.
Like, just for me, it's just a long novel and it's harder. And I think especially for a teen, there's so much in there that just didn't grab me as a teen. And I needed that at that age. But it was Emma for me. I always feel like it's Emma for me that like, that was the book. I think if I'd read Northanger Abbey when I was 13 and like on the Star Wars forums pretending I was a dude, because if you had a screen name that was a girl, then you were immediately like fake fangirl, just like you probably would be today, regardless. But you know, Northanger Abbey is like epitome fangirl. I would have loved that book, but it was Emma for me when I was, you know, probably close to a senior or junior in high school. And it just clicked. Like I felt that, like I got that of like, I'm in this small town and I'm kind of stuck with these things, but what are the ways that I can kind of control the devices around me? Like, what are the things, like, who are the people in this micro community? And that, like, I don't know, it's just something about that and like her growth. I think too, you know, when you're reading novels of growing into adulthood as a teenager, those are really poignant and important a lot for you. Like, you know, that's why I assigned Siddhartha for you to read at, you know, usually that really crucial point in your time, in your life. But Emma clicked for me in such a way. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and I have that copy and I'd illustrated it. Like I'd done little like illustrations. Gosh. Like I have like little illustrations of like on the couch where like Elton's like at the party where Elton's trying to like lean over to talk to Emma. And she's like, what is like happening?
That's adorable. Are they all drawn in the style of anime?
No, because I'm not that good at drawing.
I just felt like I needed to clarify that because I can just see it in my head. If it had been me, it would have been all puffy letters because I was a teenager in the 90s.
I appreciate that. I think that someone should do all those versions. Like I know they're slowly doing manga versions, but I'm just like, I want all of the illustrated versions because there's a tradition of illustrating Austen. Maybe not like her first pub, but like honestly, like after those first editions, after her death, the tradition of illustrating her is massive. But that's a whole, my ideas on her visual representation and why that needs to always be changing is important, is a different conversation. That's a side tangent. But like, yeah, Emma clicked for me in a way that like, as I went to college and was rereading her and like exploring her more, I was just like, oh shit, like I did not know what was happening. I didn't get it. And it was just great. Like, it was just like a fun thing that like I could go back to. I didn't major in literature. I was the person who would audit, I'd sit in your classes if you'd let me sit in, but I wasn't going to be able to take it for credits because that's not what I was there to get a degree in. I was there to get a degree in something else that wouldn't pay me anything. And that would be impossible to market. And I remember, after college, I went to Bath. Like, I visited my friend in the UK for a little bit because I knew before grad school, it's like, I've got a little bit of savings left. I'm not going to have any money after grad school because I'm going to a very small, little known school called University of Southern California, which is going to cost me all of my money. And I still haven't paid all those loans back. But I knew I wouldn't have any cash, much like a Jane Austen heroine. And I'm like, I'm going to spend what I have, go to this like European trip, get to experience this for like the first, maybe only time. But one of the places that like I for sure went was Bath. And like, we did like the Jane Austen walking tour, and our tour guide was so good, so good. She like, the tour is technically over. And then she was like, if anyone wants to join me, I always, at the end of my tour, do this freebie extra where I'll walk you along this path where Anne and Wentworth would have walked, and I'll read you the letter.
Gravel path.
The gravel walk. Yes, we've done this too.
And I'm just like I even get chills now thinking about it. Like, oh my God, like that woman was so good. And I'm like, she's probably like a fucking volunteer who just like loves this shit. I want to be this person at some point. But like, she was just like, whoever wants to stay. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm going to stay for the Wentworth letter. Like, who am I? And like, that was just so magical. Right. And up until that point, I hadn't really interacted with other fans of Austen, right? Like, I had encountered tons of people who were like, Austen's just romance. And I'm like, bye. Goodbye.
Haters to the left.
Do not need you in my life. You miserable sods. But
that's why we made this podcast.
I mean, they're out there, and they're still out there, but I'm always just like, oh, maybe you should revisit her, maybe you should just let it go. I don't care. I enjoy her. That's all I care about. Getting to experience that, and then being like, there's a whole center for her here, even though she hated Bath, blah, blah, blah. But this is still like a communing point for fans. This is still like a massive thing. And like, I didn't know a lot of that as like somebody who did love 2005 Pride and Prejudice and who was a fan of these things. I was just like, wait, like for some reason, like I hadn't sought out those online communities. And there was a really good confluence after that, which was I moved to Los Angeles, a bigger city that did have Jane Austen events. I lived in much smaller towns that didn't have those things. And then the Lizzie Bennet diaries had started coming out.
Yeah.
Love it.
That was like a big confluence point. Not only was it like that community, which like I really think people need to understand the context of Pemberley Digital was the parent thing, but that was owned by, like, that was started by part of the Vlogbrothers, and like all of their intent around their community building is really positive and wonderful. And like, I think a lot of people, like, as much as it's like, that was a really good experience, I'm also like, you need to contextualize the structure of that, because anyone could have been like, I'm making this thing, and it could have gone to shit. But like, they knew what they were doing. They cultivated a wonderful community, and they weren't going to handle people. Like, they weren't like, that was a community that was not going to stand for people being toxic to each other. And I really think that's what helped that place flourish, because it was like, this is a beloved novel. Yeah. But like, Star Wars is a beloved entity, and that community is toxic. Right.
Yeah,
like,
right.
But I think there's so much credit is due to that community space having been like a bedrock before they went into Pemberley Digital and before they started doing these multi-platform stories. And anyway, so like, that was my first, oh damn, like, I love this internet fandom too. And like, I started going to local Jane Austen book clubs that were kind of run by like the local Jasna group. But like, that was my kind of first foray. So I was experiencing Austen at that time in memes and fun things, and then also going every once in a while, like taking like a 2-hour round trip bus ride to go to a book club that I would have to, like, we would sit and listen to Professor talk for like an hour, and then we would have tea, and then we would talk, it was just very different spaces, but it was still, we're coming together because we love Jane Austen, and we love the text, and we love the related works. And it was really fun to do those differently, because it was just like, memes weren't going to really cross over to that book club. It was a much older demographic.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like, also me coming into the online, discussions, the Twitter threads on Pemberley Digital, I wasn't going to be like, actually, if you cite this letter from Jane Austen to her sister, like that wasn't going to be, the exact place for that convo. Be like, you actually misinterpreted that one. No. And it was just really fun, like being in those places. And yeah, like after that, Drunk Austen started, and like she started the page, and then I joined like 3 weeks later. And then like I was just posting all of my memes consistently for like, and that was, where people knew me for 7 years. But I also was really involved locally in Jasna on and off in different ways. Because I'd live in places that didn't have Jasna,
right.
exist.
So that value of that structure there. Like when you've lived in places just does not have a Jasna. I mean, it is so isolating, your fandom. And I think that's why your internet fandom, I will just briefly interrupt you to just say this one thing, which is my love of Austen was so solitary for such a long time. And then discovering Drunk Austen was a revelation because I didn't realize it could also be fun, and we could also be laughing. We could also be making memes. And then it was such a revelation. And it was like, we can all have a joyous community.
Well, I want to just thank Bianca, because I don't think it's overstating to say that your work with Drunk Austen is probably responsible for bringing a lot of young fans to the fandom, for sure. I mean, we are now, the internet and social media is where younger people live, and your like sense of humor and the irreverence, and there's not this like putting it on a pedestal. And I think younger people really respond to that, and especially the humor. And and I definitely did. So, thank you for that. I thought it was amazing.
It's not a gate-kept topic. There's no gatekeeping in like your current post now or your posts then, because it's fun for everyone. And your local involvement too, like that's always been a part. It sounds like that's always been a part of your Jane Austen fandom locally. And then nationally, you're such an activist. You're such a force in the world for structure and for good, which is different than me. So I need people like that to do that work.
That's Kristen is a force for evil.
But I'm not
chaotic evil for sure.
Association work is like, okay, we're talking about bonnets and letters, and all of a sudden we're talking about bylaws. And then it's like, it's work now, and it's having to relate to other people and having to make meetings on time. And I'm just not professionally, it's too much. And personally, it would be way too much. So the fact that you've devoted all of this time for free to doing these things, people really, really appreciate that.
I think that's like the thing, right? Where like I can fast forward and go back, but like it was really interesting. I had a recent conversation with someone who was talking about like Jasna stuff, which I can get into more details about what Jasna stuff is defined by. But I was just like, I mean, I've given enough of my free labor. Like I've given some free time. Like, because the stuff that's basically the background of my involvement with Jasna is I was going to book clubs. I was going to like meetings when I could. And, I'd moved back and forth to places that did have Jasna and didn't. I'd started my own Jane Austen book clubs where there weren't any book clubs, where there weren't even Jasna regions. But, Jasna was always a thing that I was like, oh man, like if I can get into a meeting, like those are cool. They're different, but they're cool. And like the way that I run book clubs is probably also not the same as like how some of the Jasna adjacent book clubs are run. Mine are usually going to be at a bar.
I'm sure yours are more fun. No offense.
They might include craft nights. They might include movie nights. But they're a little bit looser. I think, I feel like Jasna and New York Juvenilia might also do a little bit more similar, like out of the box things. But I'd been going on and off to meetings. And when I moved more permanently once to the Bay Area, I was going to those regularly. I moved away, moved back, and I was like, I'm going to pay to be a life member because like I'm already paying enough money. Like I finally have a job, a full-time job. I'm going to pay, just do this. It'll pay off itself early because I'm still in my 20s. Like it's going to pay itself off. And I did that, and I got really involved locally. And it was just, it's one of those things where like I wanted to give back to a thing that like, it may not have been like this is my exact checklist of all the Jasna the Jane Austen ways that I want to celebrate her, but like it was a way to celebrate her. And for me, going to some of those meetings, I was like, hey, let me just help you with marketing. Like we got some marketing problems. If I don't know when the next meeting is, unless I went to the last meeting, this is a daisy chain that cannot work. Little things like that. But I think, this is just like basic stuff that I think a lot of regions, especially pre-COVID times, weren't thinking about. And I was just trying to get in there and like talk to other folks who also had similar, questions like for other regions, if they needed questions answered. But like, I was just trying to keep, this is a fun place where we can, it's a tradition. The regions existed for a long time. The orgs existed for a long time. How can we keep folks interested and keep going and all this stuff while also balancing accessibility?
It sounds like you were trying to drag your Jasna region into the 21st century.
The Jasna region had kind of been like afloat. I'd say, people get tired. And I totally get that. Like I recently explained very much why I was tired. And I get that. Sometimes you just need people to re-energize and also bring things in. I think with any volunteer org, any nonprofit volunteer space I've been in, social media marketing seems to be the thing that's always the farthest behind, because usually you're not going to have a volunteer that will know the work and do it for free, and then be listened to. Which like is not a specific dig at just Jasna. I think it's a thing a lot of places deal with, where when you get young folks in, you're just like, but we've always done it this way. And sometimes there's a reason we should change things.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. A lot of these organizations, they are run by older people. So like you were saying, they are not the ones who are social media, internet marketing savvy. But then there's this like, well, why should I listen to this millennial kind of attitude? But if you want your organization to thrive and not wither, sometimes you got to do that.
Especially too in a fandom when we're all looking to the past and we're all looking to the and
the 19th century
technology, right? Their interest might not be in how to use modern technology, and it's in a way a diversity issue when it comes to just age. First of all, because I know that feeling. I mean, we have a robust Jasna in Boise, but the first time I walked in there, it's huge actually. But the first time I walked into one of their teas, I was the only woman. It was all white women over 50, basically. And, I'm a white woman, but even just that being so much younger gave me pause and made me think, wait, am I fully welcome in this space?
Am I welcome here?
Do I feel comfortable? And of course, everyone was wonderful. They immediately welcomed me, but that just feeling when you walk in the door can be enough sometimes to keep people from coming back.
Well, anytime you're the only type of fill in the blank person in the room, it can be alienating.
Really scary.
Kristen, all of this talk is making me think, do we need an intern? Are we old and out of touch?
Yes, we are.
Podcast,
and we're
so
bad at
2020.
social media.
Did we just go to all Instagram live streams?
Well, that's the thing.
Are we behind? Oh my God, I am like a withered crone.
We are withered crones, but that we have never wanted to do good social media because I used to be in social media and it's awful. Like when it's a job, it can wear you down so fast.
Social media is draining.
Oh my God.
Especially like doing it on your personal after you do it all day for somebody else.
Yes.
Well, the problem with social media, I think there's no 9 to 5.
Right.
Yeah.
It's constant and it's instantaneous, and people you have to be on all the time.
The engagement. If you intend to engage, people are engaging outside of the workday, right? And the other thing I would say is just the sheer volume of stuff that you create and put out every day, every week is astonishing. Like it's really hard work. And so I just think it needs to get recognized how much you're actually doing.
I mean, it's low-key probably like a combo of undiagnosed, probably ADHD, and I was just one of those gifted kids that liked to do a lot of shit all the time.
I was gonna go on medication, but my manic phase was so productive that I just couldn't.
Oh, that's more true. That hits home right there.
I thought about not making that joke, Kristen, but I thought you might appreciate it.
Bianca, I can cut this out, but if you don't know, I'm bipolar, so that's what she's referencing. So I just came off this insane hypomanic phase. But go ahead with your.
I didn't know that. Well, I haven't talked to anybody in 2 months. So.
Those are real things where I'm just oh shit. Also, when people talk about in Austen, that's actually a thing that just came up recently in Jane Austen Universe, the group that I ran on Facebook, where it's someone had wanted to ask in another Facebook group that's problematic around Jane Austen, but they'd wanted to post who do you think might be neurodivergent characters in Jane Austen? Because I'm reading these characters, I really relate to these characters, but this is also, I've been told symptoms of the things that I have and I experience. And the person had to come to my group to post it because that group ixnayed it and said that they did not allow discussions like that because it caused dissent in the group, and that they didn't allow things like that. And I'm like, so she posted it in the Jane Austen universe, and along with the story about like how it got rejected. And I was just like, I'm glad that you have a safe space here, but also someone broke down about like how Emma Woodhouse is like ADHD and like broke down the thing. I was like, oh shit.
Well, that makes me feel bad now for just thinking at first she was just kind of a bitch. Like that was like, oh no.
I mean, I don't think like like I don't
like
think
those aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can also say she's like a bitch. Like Lady Catherine is also a bitch, but like like Jane Austen specifically writes characters in a certain way. But I was also like, oh shit, the Emma thing has me like real shook for like a while now. Where I'm just like, remember all those, like, it's just a montage mentally all the time. So I was like, I'm such an Emma. I'm such an Emma. And then like me doing like 15 things a week. And I'm like, oh shit.
Maybe that's why you connected with that novel first.
I mean, that's the thing, right? And like, that's really like the key of like what makes me love these community spaces. For me, reading Austen by myself was an experience, and I still enjoy it in some ways. But reading Austen with other people is better than anything else to me. Like experiencing her, like when between the time that 2005 Pride and Prejudice has come out and the last time I saw Pride and Prejudice 2005 in a theater, because some places do those those throwback screenings, which it was literally the next to last movie I saw in a theater before the pandemic. I saw Pride and Prejudice at Alamo Drafthouse. And then like, I think it was like 2 nights later, I saw Emma.
I would say that was mine too.
Yeah.
And it was one of those champagne things. And the way the audience has reacted to that movie has changed as I've grown. And that is amazing. I'm like, that's a microcosm of what it is to read Austen with other people. When I saw 2005 as a teenager and I was in that theater, no one was like, oh my God, yes. Yeah. When we hear the speech where she's just like, I'm 27 years old and I have nothing. That's why I have to say yes to Collins. And like the theater was just like dead silent when I was a kid, right? When I saw that in 2020, everyone was just like, fuck yes. Good for you. Like,
get that girl. Get that Huntsford living.
And I'm just like, like, to me, I'm like, that's what's really important. Is that like, I love reading Austen with other people because people have amazing lived experiences and perspectives that I'm not ever going to have just me alone. I could do a million years of research and still not have everyone's experience down pat. And I learned so much from other people and through other people about Austen, but I also, through those conversations, learn more about people. And like, as much as, yes, Austen is about like a manners kind of thing, I'm also like, she's so much about people and how we interact with each other and like class and how that, and like, as much as Americans especially, like, we don't have classes. I'm like, no, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
we do. And like, and I think that's why like reading Austen with others is so enriching and experiencing it. Like, again, like even watching the movies and thinking like, oh man, like the way that we react to different points is so different. The way that I reacted to the news of Wentworth and the new adaptation being cast as a man of some like background of like a Black background in some way. I was like, wow, making this a story that has undertones of not only classism, but racism is going to hit home with how many of us, especially in these ages where people of color are coming into our own and are making money and are being in charge of companies and yet are still being treated like shit because of our race. And I'm like, man, like the people who are just like out here complaining about like all these historical facts that aren't actually facts and are easily debunked with a Google search. I'm like, just sit with your racism. Like, I don't need this, but I also am so excited to have a theater outing with friends where I hope we can just rent the whole theater to watch that one day.
Yeah.
And we can just experience it together and be like, fuck this terrible family, because the added layers there are going to be sublime. But anyway, Jane Austen.
Bianca, your next meme writes itself. It's going to be, yeah, sex is great, but have you ever experienced Austen with other people?
Literally.
Yeah.
I think what you said is so important too. And I so strongly relate with it, because when we started this podcast in 2015, really, I was not participating in any online community. It was just me and Maggie. And like when I go back,
has it been 6 years?
Yeah, it's been
Oh my god.
2015.
Oh my god.
When I go back and listen now, some opinions that I had were so rigid, were things I don't agree with anymore. And my mind and worldview and the way I see these things have been so expanded by listening to other fans and what other fans have to say. So I started this podcast with no one will listen to me, to it is great to hear all of these different perspectives. Let's talk them over. And it's so crazy to think of that one community that wouldn't allow that post, because it's messed up in so many ways. But fundamentally, if you don't want to have a discussion, why do you have a discussion group?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And I think that's the key. It's like, well, who gets to talk about Austen? How do they talk about it? And I think that's like the key that I've tried to think about when I'm in any community, right? Like, who gets to talk about this thing and how do they get to talk about it? Who's empowered? And it's like, that is a group. Like, there are groups that just want to retain a cis, white, like heteronormative space that erases, like, just like literally, there are Austen spaces that have just deleted any discussion of even Black people existing at that time. And I think that like this is why it's critical for places to, like, for not only individuals in the spaces, but people who are in charge of adjacent spaces, people who are, involved in nonprofit work around this, to be like, how do we make a stand against that kind of stuff? Because that's anti-racist work. Like,
yeah,
you need to really look at who is coming to your space and who they are keeping like out, and like creating safe spaces for folks. Because like, I even remember how many years back getting shit for being like, this is a feminist space, and people being like, how dare you? You cannot do this. And I'm like, I mean, A, we can, and B, why is it your hate so much?
This isn't a political group. I'm doing my like quotation marks where if you say anything that's related to anti-racism, diversity, inclusion, and social justice, don't get political. It's not political.
And also like, it's always funny to me because I totally get, folks in my inbox, they'll be like, it's political. And I'm like, Jane Austen,
I love the class. For those who can't see, Bianca just sassily pushed up her glasses. It's not political. It was great.
It's like, it's just like a weird thing that I'm just like, that's how I feel like they're talking. They're like, actually. And I'm always just like, Jane Austen talked about politics. Here are all the examples. Please come back to me later. Like,
I'll send you my footnotes. Listen.
I'm just like, I'm not here for those. I'm not going to waste my time on people that don't want to hear that.
Well, this is kind of Austen adjacent, but what you're talking about, I feel like there's a lot more conversations, especially with race going on, following Bridgerton.
Yes.
Which is obviously not Austen. It is, however, clearly inspired, set in a Regency world. And that was so welcomed by me and many, many people. And I couldn't open I'd open a newspaper. Who does that? I couldn't go to a news site without seeing articles in mainstream media like Washington Post, Entertainment Weekly, all of these things talking about the whitewashing of British history, all because of Bridgerton. And so I think we're seeing these kind of conversations now in the Austen fandom a lot because of that production.
And we're going to keep seeing them. I think that, Mr. Malcolm's List just finished like yesterday filming, and that's going to be, from what I know, that it is racially blind cast, and it's a Regency story. It's going to be a Regency film. There's a short film if you want to watch it now. That was kind of the precursor to it all. And we're going to have more Bridgerton. Well, that's going to be around for a while. And they also seem to be also working out some of their issues of representation too. But also, again, we have a new Persuasion coming. We're going to have a lot of things coming. And I'm also, here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's multiple prongs. It's yes, just representing people. Why the fuck not? Why are we just continuing the endless thing of we can only have people of color if it's a traumatic story?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we erase them completely. The other thing is, I think a lot of people who are mad about Bridgerton are just like, it's not centering me. And I'm like,
it's not realistic. It's not Oh, like someone getting eaten out on the like marble stairs at someone's house is realistic. Come on.
We all know that's uncomfortable. We all
We're
know
not gonna
she
do
had,
that.
it's so real though. Like the people who are just like up in arms, and I'm like, okay, but like, it's fantasy. Like, why are you this upset? And I think for me, it was trying to unpack that and be like, why are you this upset?
Yeah.
Like,
this is what gets me mad about Game of Thrones too. Like completely unrelated. Like all the violence against women, and in the books they're like 12 years old. Like, why do we have to have? I'm trying to create a realistic medieval fantasy world. Like, okay, whatever. I see you, George R.R. Martin.
And that's the thing, right? I think this is like all these conversations to me are not a microcosm. I'm like, asking why your fantasy has to continue to like hurt marginalized communities is a valid question.
Yeah.
Also, why are you demanding that fantasy spaces that center marginalized people and their comfort and their joy, why are you mad about that? Like, why do you, that was the thing for me, especially at Bridgerton, where people were just like, actually, Black people would have. And I'm like, why do you want oppression in a fantasy? Like, this is, you don't understand how romance genre works. You don't understand how this plays out. But also, this is a fantasy. These people didn't exist except for the queen. That's a whole different fucking can of worms dealing with those conversations.
This reminds me of, there's been a lot of articles also written about the anniversary of the Disney Cinderella that had Brandy and Whitney Houston. Mm-hmm. And I remember the king and queen were Vincent Garber and Whoopi Goldberg, and their son was, the prince. I think he was played by a Filipino actor. They're like, in what universe do Whoopi Goldberg? And I'm like, in this universe, bitch! Like, it's a fantasy. Who cares? Who cares?
Exactly. And I'm like, that's the thing. I'm like, examine why you care. And the other thing about Bridgerton that's so fun and amazing for me is like having the money discussion with people where I'm like, okay, let's just talk about money. Let's talk about audience and money and marketing. Not that I think that's the most important conversation, but I do think that we need to think about that if we want to have integral conversations. White people have been centered in a lot of media. When you center people of color and it brings in a ton of money, especially compared to productions centering white people that have maybe been done 15 million times already, and that's why you're tired, you don't want to watch it, that signals to everybody that these are stories worth investing in. And I think people are just going to have to understand this is the future. The reason that Bridgerton was made was because there has been an outcry for so long asking for the bare minimum, and someone finally did it. And this is proof of concept. Bridgerton making a buttload of money is proof of concept that investing in these stories and making them center people of color is going to be important going forward.
But also investing in people behind the scenes, because Netflix is smart, and they were like, hey, Shonda Rhimes, we're going to throw money at you and bring you to Netflix, and she knows what she's doing.
And I think too, like looking at the fact that like that stands in direct contradiction to Sanditon. And I'm not going to get into the Sanditon like cesspool of like how that could go, but like Sanditon didn't have writers of color.
Zero.
And that is what I'm trying to say, which is investing in these stories that are actually well done, that have the people of color behind the scenes and in front of the camera, that have that investment of trying to do a story well. That is the future. Sanditon failed because it didn't do it's a white man who's gotten to write Austen for a long time, and I'm frankly over white men's opinions on Austen, except for my husband's maybe. But like, but like, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, it's telling. It's telling how the actresses from Sanditon have talked about that. It's telling how the folks like have responded, how people of color have responded to both when they first came out. And I think that like Bridgerton does stuff differently because it just is the future. It makes money. And
that's so funny too, because sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to keep talking. Sorry.
No, yeah, go.
I follow the Sanditon, like Save Sanditon boards. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was fine, whatever. But the interest in Bridgerton has actually led to renewed interest in Sanditon, and everyone's a flurry because they think there might actually now be a season 2. There's been like casting announcements that were posted looking for actors for Sanditon season 2. So everyone keeps thinking an announcement is coming. That would not happen without Bridgerton because that leads to renewed interest in Austen and, Regency historical drama. And so it's just like, I'm wondering if there is a Janeites in season 2, if they will shift more towards a Bridgerton type production. I don't know. We'll have to see. But it's interesting.
I think they would have to. Like, I think that, like, in this new world, you would have to do that, or it would be another waste of time.
Yeah, and especially after the actress, I can't remember her name.
Crystal Clark.
Thank you. After she basically called out on Instagram and Twitter the production for their lack of diversity, I would hope that there would be some positive.
If you're going to tell the story of a Black woman, you need to have voices in the writer's room. And I think she had to go back to them and say, no, this is not what this character would have said or felt. And she shouldn't, that's a burden that shouldn't be on her.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say,
I'm not paid to like do rewrites for you.
Yes. Now she has to be a consultant, which is unpaid emotional labor, that she's in this sea of people who want to tell a story. Anyway, I was going to say, one of the things, just as a slight aside, one of the things I loved about Bridgerton is that it wasn't exactly colorblind, because they wrote into the story.
Yeah.
It was only 1 or 2 lines, but it was explaining something like, these characters, our Black characters that are now in the gentility, were elevated and given titles because Queen Charlotte is Black and the king married her, and then things changed racially.
And wasn't that so interesting?
It made the story more interesting, because all of a sudden his father was more invested in this title, and there was there was sort of a prestige and saying, like, we need to hold on to this. And I think if somebody really struggled with the lack of historical accuracy, that was an explanation in 2 sentences that would be, make everything make sense to you fantasy wise. Not that it needed to, but I just thought it was brilliant, and it made the story better. And I know you were saying something too, Bianca, about like they could even do better. And I think that you said they were going to try.
Yeah. I think they're trying, as far as especially like having more representation. Like, they did have Black actors, but like, we know that the British colony, like, the British colonized more countries.
Yeah, I did notice a lot of what looked like maybe like Southeast Asian and stuff like that, people in the background and like ball scenes and stuff. But yeah, I think having more like speaking roles and important secondary characters like that would be very cool.
It seemed like they're going for that, like, from their recent casting announcement. But I also think on the Austen track, it's just like, this is just where it's going, because that's where money is. Because why don't people deserve to have their story told? And I think, like, for me, like, especially looking at like the negative reactions again, like for Wentworth, I'm like, you had white Wentworths.
Yeah, there's plenty. There's plenty. There's several.
Yeah, we've had this. We've had this, and giving Wentworth either a Black or a biracial background, that makes the story more interesting. They might be treated as totally colorblind, or they might bring that element into the story. But either way, it gives it a dimension. How hurtful would it be?
Like, that could be a big reason why her family was so against it. Like, to me, it makes so much sense.
Yes.
And I think
this is going to be hard to listen to, because we're just all like saying the same thing.
And like theaters have done like blind casting for so long. So it's very weird to me that these people are supposed to be like, yep, like, I'm so classy. And I'm just like, and yet if you've gone to the theater, as I say, like, try to do a fancy face, a lot of productions are racially blind cast these days. It's just where things have been moving for a long time. I think the issue is that Hollywood, like many industries on different playing fields, right? As far as diversity and like having that representation there. But I'm like, like, theaters have been doing this for a while too. Like, I don't see you showing up to your local theater and being mad that your community theater of their pool of actors, use their pool of actors to fill the Bennets, and some of the Bennets don't look the same, and that's fine, because the Bennets usually don't look the same because they're not all actually siblings.
Yeah.
Like, you just happen to have an issue with the fact that, like, the whole point, I guess, is like, people are uncomfortable, and I just want them to unpack it without having to yell at everybody on the internet and ruining it for everybody else. Because that was my issue with it. Like, I'd see posts where people were like, I'm so excited for Bridgerton because it like was something that connected to them, and that's people coming in being like, I hated it. It was ugly. And I'm like, why? But why? Why did you need to do that?
Yeah, no, now maybe you didn't enjoy Bridgerton because, you thought that it was very repetitive, or I don't know who would say
There's a host
that.
of reasons.
Yeah, like there's definitely things that you can be, there are legitimate criticisms and critical.
And some of it is a difference in taste, right? One half of the world, the pleasures of the other.
Probably not get through like all the sex stuff. She would just be like, no. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't, that is separate from that issue.
Yeah, and I think, Bianca, too, in one of your videos that you made, I think just for your YouTube channel, and you were talking to other customers, and you were saying, stop gatekeeping who can enjoy, or that the fact that people can enjoy Bridgerton. I mean, if you care, and I'm paraphrasing, you can correct me, but it's like, it was something that was like, you are gatekeeping because this is bringing people a lot of joy, and you are immediately going on their threads and telling them that they can't feel that joy. And it's exactly as you said. And it's like, if you care that much about some costuming detail, and those details are really important to you, I'm not saying you can't care about those things. I'm just saying you need to take a step back and think about what you're saying and how it affects other people and their joy and their enjoyment. And they have every right. And, it connects to some of the things I've said in the past about the Mansfield Park, the Patricia Rozema adaptation of Mansfield Park. I got really frustrated with it, and I never considered why other people might connect with it. And I think that video and some of the Reclaiming Jane podcast and our conversation with them, maybe it just turned the light bulb on for me that, like, I really need to stop being so angry about this movie. You know what I mean? Like, I really need to take a step back. And as you were just saying, unpack it, think about why, think about your actions and how they affect other people. Like, that is Jane Austen. That is what the base of what she's saying. Think about how your actions impact other people. That's what we're all here for. And we're reading these books and we're treating them so reverently, and are you missing that message?
They are. I think like that's been like a big thing for me. I'm like, oh, you think you're Lizzie Bennet, honey, but you're Lady Catherine. Okay.
Ooh, snap. This is like they trying to convince me that the new Star Wars trilogy is terrible, even though I enjoy it. And his reasons are not the like gross reasons, like, oh, raisin berries, blah. He like has, again, I was saying like legitimate critiques, which are fine, but I still think it's fun. So finally he would launch into his spiel, and I just had to be like, I don't want to talk about this. I enjoy it. You just have to live with that.
You can just like, it's that easy. Like, I think that's the thing. I've talked to other people where I'm just like, it's just so easy to not shit on someone's parade. Like,
that's my whole thing.
If it's like harmful, right?
Don't
like,
shit on other people's fandoms.
Yeah. I'm like, if it's like a harmful thing that's happening, I'm like, it's different, but like, it's not harming you for someone to love a thing. That's different. I'm also like at the very core too, I keep going back to like as you mentioned, like the gatekeeping Bridgerton video, where I was really talking to you about the idea that like fandom is about something that we all love. And this thing gets really popular in a lot of fandoms, and Star Wars is one of them, the takedown video, where it's like, I'm going to critique every single little thing about this and tell you why you should fucking hate it. And it's just like, then that it seems to me like you aren't a fucking fan of this thing, because you don't seem to love it, and you seem to want everyone to fucking hate it, and you seem to want to like make your fans as toxic as you are. And I'm not here for this, because this is not okay. And like, you can't on one hand being like, we are so open to everybody, and then the other be like, fuck this polyester, it's so ugly. And I'm like, not everyone can afford fucking silk. Fuck you. Like, we can't, like, people can't. And like, you can't do both. You can't do that. Like, we want everyone to be here, but I still get to be a massive bitch to everybody and be like, this isn't perfect, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, we like most historical costumers, especially like newbies, are not trying to be reenactors. Like, I don't think you could accuse most of the newbies as trying to attempt to be reenactors. Like, some people might be like, I'm trying to build up to that, but I don't think you could accuse the majority of them of trying to pretend that they are already reenactors. And in that space, like, they're very protective of why they use specific things. I'm like, good for y'all. I still think there's minor gatekeeping in those spaces because of that, because if you're going to maintain, you can only participate in these things if you meet these criteria. You have to give resources. You have to mentor. I digress. But like, that's a big thing in communities. I'm just like, making them cesspools of negativity, where then you create a circle around like, we can't talk about how Charlotte might be a lesbian because that makes some people upset. We can't talk about neurodivergent characters. That makes some people upset. And it's like, but who? Who are you protecting and who are you excluding? And I think like that's the big conversation that everyone's having in their spaces. And I think that, you know, like the Jasna thing was over the summer, they were like, we're going to put together a committee to like help with diversity and equity. And then they kind of didn't realize what that means. And I think a lot of places are grappling with that. Like, I don't think it's just Jasna, but I think a lot of places are grappling with that because they thought we could just say a thing and we could say we were trying and maybe we could put some people to think about that.
Yes.
But they didn't really understand that means a commitment to structural change.
Like after like this summer with the, or I guess last summer with the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter, all the companies on social media posting statements, like performative allyship and stuff like allyship, things like we support Black Lives Matter, blah, blah, blah. And then people are like, okay, Nike, what are you doing other than just posting on Instagram? Like, show me what you're doing.
Yeah. And like, that's the thing. I'm like, people who were just like, yes, that place posts this thing. And I'm like, but what are they doing? They gave us no actions. And I think that's like, especially right now, we're getting close to a year of it. And if you are still accepting that these places are trying when they've done nothing besides make a really shitty, vague comment, and especially too, I saw the vague comments coming out again for Black History Month. I saw the vague comments of commitment to change coming out around the stop, like, you know, Asian hate, stop, you know, AAPI hate. I'm just like, you guys are not listening. If any of you are like, they're doing such hard work and you're not asking what they're doing and getting the receipts too, because part of this is also some places will be like, no, look at all the stuff we're doing. And it's like, but are you? Like,
so recent example, the Georgia voting restriction laws, you know, Coca-Cola and Delta came out with statements. It's like, but what are you doing? Show me the money.
I was going to say too, if the mission and the mission is right of Jasna, and I don't know, I've not read their mission statement, but it's to promote the love and share the love of Jane Austen, not just to keep it within the community of people who already love Jane Austen, right? Will die out if nobody new comes in, right? So imagine, I just think sometimes, imagine if I had been a young Black man walking into the Boise Jasna and it's all 50-year-old white women. And even I, a white woman who's getting into middle age, was a little intimidated. How would, you know what I mean? It's like that takes a lot of bravery. I'm not saying people wouldn't do it, but it takes a lot of bravery to be the first person to come in and start to engage with that space. And it can't just be, you know, people can come in if they want to. It can't just be that. I'm sure everyone there would have been perfectly lovely, but it has to be, we have to make an active effort to make sure that these people feel welcome and outreach to where they are. Yes. You know what I mean? Using channels that they are. And that is the way that the message of Jane Austen is going to be get out. And one of the things I wanted to say too about this is sometimes I'm really convicted in my heart, like, because on a first surface level read, Austen, and I think that if you read deeper, this isn't really true. But I think on a surface level read, what Austen is saying is respect your elders, don't rock the boat. You can't say what you think. You know what I mean? It's politeness is key. You know, like the problem too in the community is politeness is king, right? Like no one wants to have these hard conversations. And part of that, I think, is actually a white American cultural thing. I saw a tweet. Now I'm digressing too, but I saw a tweet the other day that just stayed with me. And I wish I could remember who tweeted it, but I forgot, but it stayed with me. And it was white people don't have the concept of real talk. And I completely agree with that 100%. I know in my life, if I've, approached my friends or family members who are also white and said, hey, what you did really hurt my feelings, especially if I sound upset, all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. I'm the Antichrist for suggesting they ever in their life did anything to make anyone else feel the slightest bit upset. And it's like, no, we all have done things that unintentionally or made other people upset. You have to stop and take responsibility for that. I mean, you're not going to die. Your personal identity is not being attacked if I said, oh, something you said was hurtful. all you have to do is take a step back and address that. It doesn't cost you anything to apologize when you see somebody is hurt. You should be sad if you see somebody is hurt. Do you know what I mean? And then you should start to want to work on it. That's a moral imperative. And I don't understand why people don't have that.
And it's also weird because I genuinely feel like you're right. Like that people feel like any kind of, hey, that's, not okay, is like an act of war against them. And I'm like, actually, like treating it like that talks a lot about like the conversations about like white fragility. Cause I'm like, most of us are not trying to like be like, how dare you? You don't deserve to live. Like, no, we're pointing it out and we're doing the extra labor that probably other people have already done for you to be like, hey, like, just so you're aware, like the reason why it's not okay for you to mispronounce Black people's name and only Black people's names is because, and like, if just letting you know that it's a habit you have, you should probably think about it. That's not saying like you deserve to like go away to like live on your own in a colony. It's saying like, this is trying to gently tell you what you're doing is rude and like what you're doing is probably problematic, but I'm gently telling you this is what you're doing. Please correct, because it's hurting other people. And like, it's just so bonkers because like you're 100% right. Like people are just acting like these are acts of sustained rudeness and how dare you. And I'm like, yo, like if you can't just let someone have that conversation with you, I don't know how you've gotten through your whole life. Oh, it's probably because you're privileged enough to never have had to deal with critique.
Yeah, you have to separate. I mean, there are racist actions that you may be doing that you need to stop and think, I need to not do this anymore. It doesn't mean you have to go to a new Australia that we made just for racists. You know what I mean? Like,
but could we? So there could be something to this.
It's not the end of your life. It's a chance to grow. And
people don't want to grow though, right?
I know they don't want to be told. And I understand if they're in the Austen space to just have fun and be happy. And all of a sudden someone told them that they have to grow. Like, I'm sorry, you know what's shittier than that? You know what's worse than that? Being a person of color and not being allowed into the community or being disrespected or being part of the community. And then someone says something and you feel that you're othered, right?
That's it. That's the thing where I'm like, but for who? Whose comfort are we centering?
Yeah, exactly.
Conversations, because I'm like, who's in the room and who's missing? And like, that's really the core of like a lot of DEI work. It's like, who's in the space, who is not. And that was my frustration. Eventually when I like left my stuff, it was because for Jasna, my commitments there, because I was just like, nationally, I left that because I kept, we all got the things. It's on my blog. I have all the receipts there because it's there where they talk about wanting to do better. And then the doing better was then always critiqued, always brought back as, well, the purpose of the org is to, expand readership of Jane Austen and all that. So your purpose as a group is to, work on getting Jane Austen to getting diverse people to read Jane Austen, but not change our membership. And I'm like, what the hell is the problem here?
Yeah.
Why are those? And I'm not saying that it needs to be some weird, we're just like, this is just a membership pooling thing. But I'm like, why wouldn't those be working in tandem? Also, really, it just, those gut things you get where I'm like, this feels icky. And like, for me, the ickiness of the idea of being like, we have to bring Jane Austen, this 200-year-old white woman, or this, she's been dead for 200 years. We have to bring her work to like people of color is very colonial. Cause I'm like, A, most people already have to read her in school.
Yeah.
B, what if the work, instead of this like shut down, this is what we're doing. This is what you have to do. This is your prerogative. What if having the discussion about like, what does that mean about, hey, maybe we could also have a sister program with local regions where there's mentorship. But in that, we also have to do the work of making sure that local regions are anti-racist and that they have community guidelines that they're aware of going in saying like, hey, you might be interacting with communities that you as a person may not interact with on a personal level in real life. So this is how you treat other people with respect. Just letting you know, just an FYI. Just things like that. Then like, you can't just be like, this is a thing and you can't talk about AGMs and how they can work and all these things. Like they all work together because this is a structural thing. And also, bringing Jane Austen to somebody and trying to force them to read it when they don't relate to it is not always going to be successful. Like, why don't we then have a bigger discussion about like, should we be putting Evie Zaboy's work into this, right? Like, she wrote Pride, which is I feel like it's an Afro-Latinx story, which not international. I've seen people label it as international. Like, it is written about American experiences. They just happen to be multiracial and from like their homes are just homes that you've not experienced. But these are people who, I mean, just like my dad would be like, I'm American, even though he was born somewhere else. And like, he's lived here long enough. I think people really need to adjust the idea that people of color are also in your community and they are also calling themselves American or from that city or from whatever. And like, if you just tick the box in your head that any person of color is, quote, international, then you're automatically not understanding how you could relate to them and how
where are you from? Where's your family from?
Right.
But,
yeah. I just think, like,
but then you get the like real America. Remember that bullshit? We got that too, like in with Virginia, because we have a very Northern Virginia, Southern Virginia divide. Well, they're from real Virginia, meaning Southern, white, more rural, conservative Virginia. It makes me angry. But there's this idea of Austen, like you're a missionary, right?
Yeah.
For Austen. And I feel like that's kind of what it sounds like Jasna was kind of going for, maybe.
There are things that if you would just, as you're saying, go into a classroom of Black children and handed them Austen, might even be harmful. Like, you're supposed to love these people who are white and who were called, you know what I mean? And so it is very interesting to talk about what she may have meant under the scenes, but you can't just push it on people with no context, nor should you want to. So what the work really needs to be done is to start having these conversations. So this might be interesting to your community is these reasons. Let's talk about the subtext. And I don't know, I think that stuff's really fascinating. And I don't know, now I'm just rambling, but I do feel that it has to be done with scaffolding, with a lot of help. And, if people aren't interested, they're not interested, but we know people of color are. Like, if you ever watch the web series Black Girl in a Big Dress, which is incredible, she's having the time of her life. She wants to cosplay here. And there are so many more people who could be having the time of their lives. And this community is not helping that, right? Welcome.
Yeah, but I've mentioned this before, but a good example of what you're kind of talking about, Kristen, I think is Kevin Kwan and his novels, where he has very explicitly said that Austen was a big inspiration for him when he was writing Crazy Rich Asians. And when he read it, when he was younger, he was just like, oh my God, this is Singapore. And he made that connection himself.
Yeah, right.
But maybe that's not something that everyone would be able to do.
I mean, but maybe people come in and their primary interest is the fan fiction that represents them. Maybe, and Jasna needs to expand to cover Jeff, right?
I mean, I think those are all parts of the conversation, right? I think too, like you said, like it's scaffolding. I think it's like, what are the other parts of this? Like, these aren't just like with anything. This isn't just an isolated thing. Like, who is doing this? Are they problematic? Have we assessed? And I think too, what was also frustrating in this was the whole assumption that like it should just be like Jedi is just doing this thing, like the diversity and equity thing should just be doing this little thing, and that National will be handling the rest. And I'm like, really? Who on National? Because so y'all have heard, and so y'all are problematic. Like literally being like, what do you mean by safe space? And being upset with us for saying safe space. And I think like those are the little things that made it really clear to me that my opinion is not only not wanted, it's not being useful. I'm wasting my time. And I also like the thing that I always stress about this was the thing that stressed me. I feel a moral obligation for every single person that's joined Jasmine because of me. Every single person. And like, I'm sure there are people who feel that too. I'm not trashing on you, but like, y'all said, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm so popular, but I have gotten DMs from people. I know this is a fact. There are people who joined Jasna because I was very visible in the community space. And because of that, I also sometimes post about my Jane Austen stuff that I do for Jasna. There are people who joined because of me, and I feel responsible for their safety. And if I could not ensure that any of the stuff that I was trying to do could create a safe space for them, I felt like I needed to publicly explain what was happening and that I could not ensure a safe space for them. Mm-hmm. And like, that's the core of really like all of it, because I was so stressed out thinking about like people being like, Bianca's on this thing. And like, I was constantly getting comments about that in DMs. I'm so excited because like, it means that Jasmine is listening. And like, all I could think was like, I don't feel heard. And like, I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels this way, but I'm not going to speak for them. But like, I felt like I wasn't being heard. And this is situations I've dealt with at work and in other DEI spaces too. So it wasn't new to me. But what really like kept me up at night was the people who've joined because of me. And if they experience some bad shit, even when I've tried to keep the conversation going about changes that need to be made, because it was the perspective I see in a lot of the spaces I work in and have dealt with, it's just like they kind of are the assumption that nothing bad has happened, even when you give them cases, even when you, and it's this weird, the thing that I kept getting that I talk about in my post is like, they wanted examples. And I'm like, why do you need these individual testimonials of trauma? Like, I'm sorry, but like, you should just trust us when we say, we need to discuss how to further protect people, how to like make things not problematic, like how to vet things, how to audit things. At the core, it was just like, I can't make any change here. And it's also clear to me that this doesn't want to hear those changes. And like, I don't want to just be like, we've brought Jane Austen to people of color. And like, people of color already read Austen. Like,
yeah, you're not bringing anything.
Yeah.
Trying to encourage more diverse people to join your organization is not bringing anything to people. Like Jasna, okay, like you're all right, but like you're not some gift to the world.
Yeah, without Jasna, people could still read Austen and could still learn, just read criticism of Austen. You know what I mean?
And like, that was the thing too. I was just like, okay, so then like, that also tells me that like, if you want us to not talk about membership expansion, then like for diverse groups, and you refuse to do demographic surveys, even voluntary ones, it goes back to the conversation we had about money. Literally, like, even if you don't care morally, because like, I think you should, but like, whatever, money's on the table. I'm sorry. That's just like a basic, like real conversation most nonprofits have. Who is our opportunity audience? Who are we missing? This is conversations I've had at other places. And it's just like, I mean, if your core thing is like membership and like money, and that helps sustain programs and stuff and scholarships and donations, that's money. Those are members that are going to sustain.
It's like an untapped market. Like there are people out there that you need to encourage to join your group because they'll pay.
How do you keep your group going if you are losing members, if they age out?
Yeah.
And also, if you have whole generations of white people too who want to make sure they're in spaces their friends can come to.
Yeah.
And that they want to support organizations that have actually done the work. What does that say? And again, that's not just a Jasmine thing. That's a thing that I see in a lot of places where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to join that thing because like they let all those problematic things happen, and I'm not going to be part of that. You know, like I can choose where to spend my time and money. But it all goes back to like, I think honestly, it's the bigger structural conversations that every place is having right now, which is the challenge of when you say that you want to create a community, who do you mean? And like, I think that a lot of people want to be like, no, we mean everybody. But I'm like, I really just, if you don't mean everybody, don't say that. Like, it's that easy. And like, I think that's like the reason for my frustration in any conversation around this stuff. Where I'm like, don't say it then. Don't put out vague statements that you're not going to live up to, because honestly, it creates a liability. Period. Like if you are saying we're creating a safe space for everybody, and then you bring a bunch of people in, and then like something bad happens.
Yeah.
And you didn't do anything to prevent it. And that's, again, not just for this org, it's any org. This is something like anyone who's heard me talk about nonprofits that need to do better. This is a conversation. You should not be waiting for a bad thing to happen. If you follow Change the Museum, that Instagram account, bad things have happened. And a lot of museums are still just like, we don't know. What? And it's just like, no, there's clearly documented incidents of bad things happening. And yet you still go, we're doing our best.
Yeah, right. Right? It's like having an online conference without a code of conduct, or with a code of conduct with no way to report a code of conduct violation. Are you really there to be supportive, or are you CYA? In a really ineffective window dressing way that, again, I also agree. I think we have a moral imperative to make sure every space that we're operating in is inclusive. And we just do. And, if some days you're exhausted and you're mentally ill that day, like me, and log off, but when you're on, do better, So,
and when people are offering to give you free help and advice, take it.
Yeah.
Like for virtual Jane Con, the all Jane Austen all weekend thing that I'm the virtual conference that
I'm glad you brought that up, because I definitely want to talk about that.
We need to boost the signal.
It's coming up. It's going to be May 1st and 2nd. And I've brought in a ton of people or more people to volunteer this year to help with it. Cause last year was kind of just I'm just gonna put this thing together really fast because we're in pandemic and we're all miserable and we're missing each other. And that's also a time that usually we would have been having Jane Austen events,
Yeah.
Our quarterly events. And I just the turnout was amazing. We even had trolls, which I think is a success.
You took the time to come troll our Jane Con?
Oh my
you're
God.
adorable.
Okay. I'm sad. I'm a little I'm sad for people who had to deal with it, but also I'm just that's kind of a mark of you made it. So but this year I brought in more people and I want to keep growing it because no person should be an island, but also B, I really think there's something to be said for the multitude of perspectives on how to do something better. I'm not going to be an expert on doing something, but enough brains on something, enough minds on something can help something grow and be amazing. And having that space to actually have the conversation instead of me being this is my thing. This is how I'm going to run it. And even my rom-com bracket is the nominations are from everybody.
Yeah.
Do I think The Mummy is a fucking rom-com? I guess I might.
I love that movie. Oh my God. They had never seen that. So I made him watch it a couple months ago. And he's like, this is actually a really fun movie. And I'm like, see? You never trust me.
It's more romantic than Indiana Jones. So I'm just okay. All right.
It's an adventure rom-com.
It's not quite romantic stone.
Is that crazy mummy ever gonna find love? I don't know. I'm not Sunamoon.
It's not a bad movie. I enjoy it. It's
fun. It is also problematic in several ways. But it's fun. For me, I find it fun.
I think it's definitely problematic. I think part of my discussions at the end of this rom-com bracket cycle was we need to keep talking about how the new rom-coms that we're nominating are more diverse and are less cringy when you rewatch them versus a lot of the classics that I'm there's some problematic shit. Even if it's just one comment, Bridget Jones's mother, but there's shit that I'm just it's an ongoing discussion there. But
I will say, we just talked about Bridget Jones. Bridget Jones's mother is horrifying, but she's purposefully horrifying. I'm not giving it a pass, but you're supposed to be ugh.
And I think that's the thing. It's at that time, people were how do we portray bad people? And it's well, let's just have them be
casually
really
racist.
And it's and now the discussion is just yes, people that are terrible, but how do we signal that in a way that's not harmful?
Not harmful. Yeah. Not hurtful to someone in the audience.
Yeah. I think again, this is the discussions of how Hollywood changes and how those how we discuss things changes. And I think that's important. And I think rom-com bracket is a microcosm of that, but that's also the Austen discussion. It's how do we interpret Austen and how do we, the illustrations of Mr. Darcy have changed drastically based on what society at that time saw as handsome.
Yeah.
I love this idea of Mr. Darcy as an avatar for what society deems the ideal man.
Yeah.
I have a talk for that I've done at a couple places. That's actually
interesting. So I'm thinking who is the 2021 Mr. Darcy?
And I think too, what's interesting is the 1940 was almost Cary Grant. Instead of Olivier too. And so part of me is always just how would we have viewed Darcy differently if it hadn't been Olivier?
I think that the ideal 2021 Mr. Darcy is probably what is his name? Who's the guy who was Killmonger? and Creed.
Oh, Michael B. Jordan? Are you thinking?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
See, my dream would be Oscar Isaac and John Boyega as some iteration of Darcy and Bingley. Like, I want them to be buddies again, but I want them to be like wingman buddies. Like, I want them so badly.
I like that. Not to be rude, both very short.
Jeez, Maggie.
I'm just saying, we're talking ideal.
But don't body shame.
I mean, not to be real with you, but I was on a red carpet for a movie. And that hero was not very tall. So
Johnny Flynn.
All actors are shorter than you think they are.
They're shorter than you think.
Yeah, they're all short. They all have to have like
and Tom Cruise is short too.
He is tiny. He's like it comes up to my knee.
The magic of cinema.
They dig a hole. They dig a hole and they're like, Kate Blanchett, stand in this hole so that you're like.
But also, I'm like, here's the thing. As someone who has consistently been under 5'2" my entire life, slightly taller than Queen Victoria, but not by much.
Oh, bless your heart.
Like, tall people is a relative term.
That's true. I mean, I'm average. I'm 5'6", so.
Like, maybe some of us would be happy with like the short representation and be like, yo, listen, like
we as a short person, we need short representation. But I also think that we can
have representation.
We can have the
We're
ideal.
We're down here.
Hey guys.
Short does not disqualify you from being a romantic ideal, though.
I guess that depends on the person.
And we shouldn't body shame. Yes, we have to be accepting.
We've had plenty of tall Darcys. It's
true.
You know what we need is a thick Darcy.
Yeah,
I would be so on board.
Dad bod Darcy or Dad bod Darcy.
Yes,
I love it. I do love a dad bod and a beard.
This is why I'm always just like, that's why I'm down, especially for like modernizations, like take us to new places. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like bring this. Like
this podcast has either gone off the rails or it got really interesting. I can't decide.
Well, yeah, no. So to go back on the rails, like Bianca, can you tell us some more about Virtual JaneCon? Like, where can people find out about it?
Yeah, you said it was May 1st through 2nd. Is that right?
Yeah, it's May 1st and 2nd. And the programming right now is all on YouTube, but I'm probably going to do like some fun, like live tweet things at some point. But all the programming is all going to be on YouTube this year. So they should be live and premiere, so you can like have chat functionality.
Cool.
Last year it was on all the platforms, and that was kind of chaotic. So iterating, learning, and the program will be up. There is a Virtual JaneCon Facebook event, an Instagram page, and a Twitter, and we also have a little newsletter sign up because Virtual JaneCon will be shifting, changing, and maybe becoming bigger and maybe a nonprofit one day.
Hey, oh my gosh.
501c3, baby.
Yeah, it's my goal. It's my dream. I'm sure it might take a while to get there, but like we do, people love this thing, but also, not only can you watch it, from wherever, you can watch it later if, people leave their videos up. But also, people have cool stuff to say throughout the year. Like some people are on deadline right now at the end of the semester and can't do it. And I'm like, I get it. So there are just tons of really cool ideas. And I also think it's a really good community. So I think, definitely folks can participate in it this year. It's big May 1st and 2nd, but I'd also say, sign up, follow so that you can be there for the future things. Because we're going to do some fun stuff through the year.
I think it's so important too that it's a virtual JaneCon. So here's my thing. So virtual conferences have gotten really good because of the pandemic. As you said, we're iterating. We know how to do them better now. It is so important to keep virtual conferences around. It is so important for diversity.
And accessibility. Not everybody can fly to wherever and like be able to walk around the convention center all day and do all that stuff.
So, and here's the other thing. I mean, I went to a conference that's usually 500 people. It had 1,500 people that year. People from places that were not the US, because I'm a librarian conferences, people do not have the budget to travel. They have to travel out of pocket. Mm-hmm. It opens up a world. And so I'm really excited for the virtual aspect of it as well. I mean, if we want to bring and give more people opportunities to participate in the Jane Austen space, virtual is the way to go, right?
And like, it's a thing that I think has proven successful for a lot of folks that have been doing the IRL thing too, because like, I know somebody who works in a space that like my area of my region is massive. So like, I definitely think that like places should be encouraging like virtual events just for accessibility of like after the pandemic, keeping some kind of virtual aspects. I think it's always going to be hard to be like, we have a live stream and the thing if you don't have tech for it. But like, I do think you're right. Like, it's really important to keep some portions of this to have some virtual programs because A, renting venues is expensive as shit.
It is.
And B, like, especially from like, I'm in San Francisco, like renting venues anywhere in the Bay Area is a lot of money. But also I'm just like, at its core, like, when you host stuff on YouTube, yes, it's like people can tune in from anywhere at any time. They can watch it later. There's also the ability to put like captions in there. Live captions, like they may not be perfect, but like, especially like if you pre-edit something, you premiere it, you have a chance to edit those captions. But I'm also just, there's so many options. Like this really opens up for keeping people in the conversation and feel like they're included. And the other thing that I try, for virtual Gen Con, it's all community made. So it's like, I'm not being like, I am selecting in this little envelope, the three people that will get to be
Bianca's Jane Con, what Bianca likes about Jane Austen.
But like shockingly and funnily enough, it's like, it is like my perfect Jane Con because everybody talking
because about what you want is diversity, because that's people. What you want.
Yeah, it's like, it's so cool. And like the stuff that we have right now, like we have someone who's going to do kind of like this interpretation play thing about like Abigail Adams and Jane Austen, what they would have said to each other. And like if there's somebody who's like super, like that's the thing, like they've worked on, like they're an interpreter and like they're really into this thing. And I'm like, oh my God. And then we have people who are talking about, like we've got some costuming folks, people who are talking about different aspects of the novels. And like, they're all different levels. Like it's not just academic. It's like folks who are just like enthusiast fans, people who come at it any place. We also have like people who are talking about like the connections between tabletop role-playing games and Jane Austen stuff and like Jane Austen world, like because there are Jane Austen like RPG things. So I'm just like,
yes, this is all the stuff that I love.
And like theoretically, there will be a live demo of one of them. Like someone's going to be hosting a live demo that may include some very well-known romance authors that like.
Ooh, that's so fun.
I'm like dying over, but I'm also just like, I want to see them play Jane Austen games. But again, like that's the thing where I'm just like, this is fun. Like I don't know who's going to submit. Like some of the folks that submitted last year like can't do it this year because like they're doing stuff. But it's also like that's why I want to open it up to year round too, to be like either once a month or so, having a cool little pop up because folks are always working on cool stuff in this community. Folks are always coming up with cool ideas, and like Bridgerton has created so many other discussion points for this space. And I think like, as we keep moving, as we grow as, community members, as people, we're always going to come up with cool stuff. Somebody's doing like a retrospective on Pemberley Digital of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And I'm like, yes, actually, I do want to like, I want to hear these things. And like, that's what's always cool to me. Like hearing these different perspectives. Cause I feel like there's some, in jazz, I'm like, there are some people that I've heard you like a million times. And like, I think you're cool, but also like, I might have heard this talk quite a few times. And like, it's like, no offense, like someone's area study and like that they're really good at giving a talk. Cause like there are people who have heard my Mr. Darcy talk like 4 times. And I'm like, yeah, you don't have to hear it again. It's fine. You don't need to know about how Wishbone is the best Darcy, but whatever.
No, I will not fight you on that. I 100% agree. He's just shy, you guys. That's the Wishbone's Darcy isn't rude. He's just shy. It just turns out that he was shy.
It's just, he's the best one. Like, that's how you shut down those convos. You're just like, no.
yes.
Like, should we do an outtake of me singing the Wishbone theme song?
You're welcome to sing it if you want.
No, I won't do it right now. That's
But like, I mean, it's fun. It's a party. And I'm just like, that's the kind of Austen that I want. Like, I want to hang out with people. I want to like love a thing. I want to come in at different spaces. You don't have to love every single bit of everything, but like, like Jane Con to me is just like, because it's community made, I love, like, that's, the core of what I said.
Yeah.
When I go to book clubs and I hear the people and the way they entered us and the way they talk about her and they love her, I'm like, that's what keeps me here. That's what, like, I love. Like, that's why I'm in these spaces, because now I'll read Emma differently. Now I'm going to be like, oh shit. Just like, years back, I don't remember the author, but she wrote that paper on Austen or on Emma's father and like how it might be signaling Alzheimer's. Her father had Alzheimer's, and like that changed so much of how I read Emma. Just like the next time I read her and I think about that, I'm like, oh, that's a critical thing to be thinking about when we contextualize this.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just like, man, like I love this. I love this fandom. You know, I always get the question of like, because of the jazz and stuff, like, oh my God, do you not like Jane Austen? I'm like, Jasna doesn't own Jane Austen. And like, it's never going to. And like, just like Jasna was created because JAS, Jane Austen Society, they didn't agree with it. I'm like, there's always going to be those spaces that are like, I don't really agree with how you're operating. And that's fine, clearly. And I'm just like, we have to make spaces that we can be heard in and that we can share and feel safe in. And sometimes those just need to keep iterating and they need to keep going. And sometimes they just need to be brand new spaces. And that's just the reality. Like that's literally the history of Jasna. And I think they can continue on. Good luck to them. Good luck to whatever they're working on. But also there's a much wider community.
And I think that's why the fandom owes you such a debt, is because you're putting in the work to make this additional space, which it is so much work, Bianca. Like, I just want you to know, I see you, like, it is so much work. Like you gave, like, you know, as you said, so much work to Jasna on their behalf for free. You're doing all of this stuff and it is a lot and so many people are benefiting from it. And we just want to thank you for that.
Aw. Thank you for, you know, I think the thing is, you know, there's still people inside Jasna who are trying to do stuff. So I'd say, you know, like,
and that's good too. That's great. Like, if they feel like they can stay. Yeah. I thought the reasoning you had was so compelling for the responsibility that you felt. And I think leaving was absolutely the right. I mean, you don't need my validation. But you know, I think leaving was like, the right thing for you.
There are times when I stay up at night rethinking all my life choices. So thank you.
No,
I mean, you know, there are people who are still trying. They feel like there's still space for them there, and that's great for them. Yeah. And I think the big thing is, like, in anyone's life advice, I tell them, like, if you feel like you're not being heard, if you feel like you're not being protected, you need to think about what that means for you. Whether it's a job, it's a volunteer thing, or whatever. Just you got to take care of yourself. I think. Yeah. That's just how we can live slightly healthier lives. And that's like,
life is too short, y'all.
Life is too short. Like, we just can't waste our time on this shit. Like, but yeah,
I haven't left the house in 7 weeks. Life is too short.
I mean, thank you. I don't know if I don't know if I do a ton for the community. I feel like I'm just like, sometimes I make funny jokes and sometimes I let my ADHD undiagnosed take effect. And then I put together a whole podcast like idea in like 4 hours. And then sometimes I'm like, it takes me 4 weeks to do this one thing I could have done in an hour. So who knows? Not that anyone needs to email me and diagnose me with the things I just said that I do.
Actually, Bianca, I think what you have is more of a XYZ syndrome.
At the end of the day, if people appreciate what I'm doing and like the stuff that I'm trying to foster, like that's great. Again, like Virtual Jane Con is made with a bunch of people this year. It's made with the community.
Yeah.
If I can help be a part of fostering these spaces and supporting them, that's all I can do. Like, that's the least I can do for a space that I feel like has brought me a lot of joy. It's more than I can do for the Star Wars community. Because I can't, you know,
no one can say that, honey.
They're beyond assumption.
Like, you know, for me,
no, you know what? I have to say, something did save the Star Wars community, and it was that video of that scene from the most recent movie with Adam Driver running through set to the I Need a Hero.
I Need a Hero.
I think that video
I watched that 1,000 times.
That saved that movie for me.
Do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah. Oh, she's seen it. Come on. Yeah. Oh, that is classic. I actually, having watched that, increased my enjoyment of the film because now I like picture it.
Well, and then what I wanted to add too was based off of what Bianca was saying was thank you to everyone who is participating in Virtual Jane Con as well. And thank you to the whole community that has grown up around it. So
it's very exciting. It's something to look forward to. Maybe I just, like I said, I don't get out, but it's something to look forward to.
Like at the minimum, we just need these things. I get like a lot of people are like, it's the pandemic's over. I'm like, okay.
Is it? Is it? It's not, guys.
I'm gonna continue operating like it isn't because it's not, and therefore I'm gonna keep planning these things.
People in Michigan are like, it ain't over, guys.
Oh man.
They're just the world is the place, and I'm just like, if I can just make it a little like help support and cultivate a space where people can like enjoy a thing and feel safe. Like when I talk to people about like DEI efforts, I talk about like, because some people feel so powerless, and I'm like, the first step is acknowledging your realm of influence, and like my realm of influence is the Austen space, right? Like, or at least like North Austen space. And that's why, like, that's been really important to me because I know the people there and I know I can make a change. And I know the people who are going to support that. But when I talk about Star Wars, I'm just like, the people that I talk to who want to do the work are too tired to do it.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the thing where it's just like, or there's been too much gatekeeping. And I'm just like, I don't like, if you can't change, like you can't change the world overnight. I can't change certain communities overnight. But like, I can try in the spaces that I know I have some use and some power. And like, that's the big thing with power. It's like, how are you using it? How are you wielding
and create your own space? That's what you did, Bianca. You just created your own.
Yeah. I try not to be too much of like, I'm going to take my ball and go do
I
try to think
you basically did, but it's just like everyone who wants to come with me is welcome.
Yeah. I try to think of it less of like, in my brain, I'm trying to think of it as a like, oh, like you said there weren't any seats for us here. Well, or like the Julia Roberts Pretty Woman, like big mistake.
Huge.
It's not a zero-sum game too, as you said. We all benefit. I can be a member of JASNA and I can go to virtual Jane Con. I can be in all spaces that I want to be in, as long as I'm not hurting anybody else or gatekeeping, or you know what I mean?
You should have told the JASNA people, like,
it's so easy.
You work on commission, right? Big mistake. Huge.
It's just like one of those things where I'm like, they can continue how they want, and I will continue how I feel like the fandom is moving toward and what they're asking for. And like, that's who I'm beholden to. Like the community that has not only welcomed me, but like embraced me, and like I've hopefully embraced them back, but not in a weird way.
Only consensual embracing.
It's
purely consensual.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't know. I love these spaces, and I've gotten so much from it, and I want to give back to it because, like I just said, my background of moving all across everywhere and finding camaraderie with Austen. I think that's like a thing that's really important. When you're in a fandom, you automatically have that one thing in common.
Yeah.
And
at least we know that someone likes Jane Austen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something to talk about right away. There's something to put you at ease. Yeah.
There's a lot.
Instant community. Just add Austen.
That's kind of the Kristen story, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I guess I kind of made a space because no one would listen to me, but it was just a space where I took up like space on the internet going, Rah, these are my opinions.
I was thinking more about how you were saying, I was thinking more about like kind of your origins coming to Austen, where like you felt so with your social anxiety, it was something that was an entry point for you.
Oh yeah.
To deal with that. Maybe.
Do you want to quickly, actually, I think this is a perfect time to quickly go to the Wheat Sheaf so Bianca, the Wheat Sheaf is our like mailbag section.
We link arms, all three of us, and we walk down the lane all to the Wheat Sheaf to check the mail.
Yes. And I wanted to give a shout out to a reader who emailed us. So thank you to Melanie for writing in. She enjoyed our Bride and Prejudice podcast, and she is Indian herself. And she said, she enjoyed the podcast, but in terms of the content, there was a ton of sort of like arranged marriage in Indian culture sort of subtext that if we had asked somebody of Indian descent or who was Indian to come on the podcast, they could have really added to that conversation. And so maybe something for next time. And Melanie was so nice about it. She was like, I'm not looking for an apology or anything, but actually I did want to apologize because diversity should never be an afterthought. Like one of the reasons that we didn't really think about guests is because with Maggie's pregnancy, we had to reschedule that podcast like 3 times.
Yeah.
But
that was my bad.
But I don't think that's an excuse for not thinking about.
No, she's right. Like we both read her message and was like, she's right.
No. So thank you for pointing that out. And I think that was a great, and maybe we can have a follow-on conversation with Selvi and Priya, who were on our podcast for our role playing.
Is Melanie making herself available?
Yeah, exactly.
This is like you raise your hand and you have a great idea, and then everyone's like, cool, you're in charge.
Thanks for volunteering, Melanie.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie.
And we had some other mailbags that, because Maggie needs to go out, I will just save for next time. But
okay, sorry. I have
Bianca,
to go.
Is there any other last words you wanted to say? At Book Hoarding is where you can find Bianca.
Yeah, follow me, find me. I've launched a Patreon, since I'm just going to shamelessly.
The newsletter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have a Patreon, and it just like right now it's just kind of going toward like supporting overall things. Eventually it'll support some other things that will be more in like a specific state that I can talk about more. But like it really supports like the DEI work and like the like marketing stuff and the like Jane Austen stuff that I'm doing, where it's like it supports like the creative work that I'm doing. But it's also like it's beneficial. So like if you join, like you'll be able to get like exclusive voting on like rom-com like movie bracket nights that we're gonna do, and like you'll also get, you know, at even the lowest tier, you get access to a Discord server that's specifically for the folks who are part of my Patreon. So like anyway, I have a thing, and I should be better at self-promotion, but I'm really bad at it because I am, even though I do marketing all day for other people, bad at it for myself. Welcome.
Well, I will promote it, and I will say that your Insta is awesome and it's very fun.
Yes. And patterns too. Can't they get like exclusive patterns or something like that? Did I see that?
Yeah. Like at certain tiers, you get access to different stuff that I'm working on. And like one of them is like patterns that like I make and like put out into the world. So like you'd get access to that versus having to wait for me to like put it out on like an e-shop, because that takes effort.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, Bianca. And so then I guess Maggie, do you want to do the honors?
Should we let Bianca do it?
Bianca, we always say
tagline.
We always say we have delighted you long enough.
I think we should all say it together.
Okay.
Okay. Should we? Okay. So I'll count to 3, and we'll all say we have delighted you long enough. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. We have delighted you long enough. That did not work on Zoom.